Your favorite Mario game and every other game in the series has a biggest flaw, so today I'll be going over every main series game's most notable issue in my own opinion. The original Super Mario Bros. Basically created the modern platformer genre, taught players how to run, how to jump, how to find secrets. The controls are still solid after 40 years, and the level design is a masterclass in teaching the players without words, and of course the music is perfectly etched into pop culture. It is a game that deserves every ounce of praise it gets for its importance and its quality all these years later. However, when I sit down to play it today, especially after experiencing the sheer scope of later titles, the biggest issue becomes impossible to ignore. There's very little variety here. Look, I know it's unfair to judge a 1985 game by modern standards, but the reality is that once you've seen all the levels in World 1, you've seen all the core mechanics, you've seen all the designs. The game essentially cycles through 4 visual themes: the overworld, the underground, the water level, and the castle, and just repeats them across 8 worlds. The great design is in the subtle enemy placement and platforming tweaks, but the visual and mechanical landscape remains, it's still a very fun game, it's challenging, but it doesn't offer the same sense of discovery that later Mario games would improve upon. Its simplicity is kind of what makes it special, but it also limits it at the same time. This is the true sequel that Japan received, and it's a fascinating piece of history. The Lost Levels is essentially Super Mario Bros. Cranked up to 11, and it's designed for players who had absolutely mastered the original. I respect the intent of it, especially since a lot of modern Mario games are too easy. This game gave hardcore fans a brutal challenge. It retains the core mechanics, the iconic look, but some slight graphical changes, and it has the same structure of the original. But it is a far more difficult game. The issue isn't necessarily the level design, it's how that design interacts with the physics. The biggest flaw is just the artificial difficulty from controls. The game isn't hard because it's clever, it's hard because it's frustrating. The physics are subtly tweaked, the wind pushes you a little further, and the jump arcs require a level of precision that the original game's engine was never truly meant to support. You can't even see where you are for some jumps later in the game. It's a game that demands perfection from a control scheme that is just not up to the task, making the difficulty feel less like a rewarding challenge and more like a frustrating artificial barrier. Games can still be difficult and be fair, think something like Elden Ring or just any of the Souls games really. They are very difficult, but it isn't unfair. It's on you to master patterns and anything else that goes with it. But now imagine if you had to do all that with the physics and controls actively working against you. I actually have a huge soft spot for Super Mario Bros. 2. It's the black sheep of the NES games, and it's still a charming game. It's not my favorite. The introduction of character selection with Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach, each with unique abilities, was revolutionary. The ability to pluck enemies and vegetables from the ground, the vertical level design, and the surreal dreamlike aesthetic of Subcon are all cool ideas in theory. It's a game that showed Nintendo wasn't afraid to take massive risk, and it gave us some of the most iconic enemies and concepts in the franchise, like Shy Guys and Birdo. Yet despite all of that, I think the biggest issue is one that everyone kind of thinks of. The gameplay just doesn't really feel like Mario. I know the history, it was a reskin of Doki Doki Panic, it's said in every video that mentions this game, but that historical context doesn't change the player experience. When I play Mario Bros. 2, I'm not running and jumping on Goombas, plucking turnips and riding flying carpets. The core loop of momentum-based platforming is gone and replaced by a slower, more deliberate pace focused on verticality and picking up and throwing items and enemies. It's a good game for what it is, it's a classic platformer, but it fundamentally changed what a Mario game was, and I just don't really like this formula as much as the traditional Mario platformer. The Game Boy's launch title, Super Mario Land, is a fascinating, almost alien entry in the series. It was developed by Gunpei Yokoi's team, not Miyamoto's, and that difference is felt in every frame. I can enjoy it, it is quirky, it does have charm. It introduces us to Princess Daisy and has a lot of bizarre enemies like the Sphinx and the Moai statues, and the inclusion of shooter levels is neat. It did try to be different, I'll give it that, and it was a handheld title for the Game Boy in '89, so it was impressive for that, but its biggest issue is just a combination of technical limitations and design choices that make it feel fundamentally off. This flaw is kind of a triple threat. The levels are extremely short and feel more like quick sketches than full Mario courses. The game is very off physics, and it's hard to tell what everything is due to the graphics. The physics feel floaty and imprecise. It feels like Mario's constantly on the moon, and this was well before Odyssey or Galaxy. The levels often end just as they introduce a new idea, and a lot of the courses just don't feel fully realized. And let's be honest, the graphics, while I guess impressive for the time, just make everything look blurry, there's no detail here. And remember, Super Mario Land 2 did come out on the same system, and that looked far better. And you could say it's unfair to judge this game based on tech limitations, but a lot of the old Mario games have aged surprisingly well, and I think this one has probably aged the worst. Super Mario Bros. 3 was the fully realized version of Mario platformers at the time. This game is for many the pinnacle of 2D platforming even all these years later. The introduction of the world map, the inventory system, the incredible variety of power-ups like the Tanuki suit, the frog suit, the hammer suit, and the sheer scope of 8 distinct worlds was a huge leap forward, and the level design is still amazing. It just constantly introduces new ideas and discards them before they get stale. It's a game that I still replay fairly regularly, and every time I find something new to appreciate. It's just so close to perfection that its biggest flaw is another product of its time, time, and it's something that feels absolutely brutal today. It's the lack of any sort of save system. For a game that's this big and has a big sprawling world, the expectation that a player must complete it in one sitting or rely on the limited, hard-to-earn P-Wings to skip worlds is just a monumental oversight. While I am a lot younger than this game, I actually did play it on my family's NES, and I could never finish it since someone would always end up turning it off, or I just wouldn't have time and I'd want to move on to another game at some point. I did later finish it on my DS through the advanced game though, and if you're playing it on Switch, then this is a complete non-issue because of save points, but I'm just basing this on the original game, and not having any save system or password system was a pretty big flaw. I also guess you'd say the underutilization of some power-ups could be a pretty big problem, since it feels like they're just completely underused, like the frog suit and hammer suit. Like, how many times do you really get that in the game? So if Super Mario Bros. 3 was the peak of the NES, Super Mario World was the peak of the SNES, and to this day, in my opinion, the peak of 2D Mario platformers. Like, I think this is the closest that the Mario series has come to perfection, like, from the 2D games. The introduction of Yoshi, the incredible secret-filled world map, the sheer number of hidden exits, and the Cape Feather, it's a game that rewards exploration like no other. The level design has a ton of creativity, it just constantly pushes the boundaries of what a 2D platformer can be. It's a game that still feels fresh and inventive today, and it's widely considered to be one of the best video games of all time. The level design, music, graphics, map, pretty much everything else is so peak that this game's biggest flaw isn't even that big of a flaw. Boss fights are weak and repetitive compared to everything else. Like, the Koopalings, while visually distinct, all require the same basic strategy of jumping on their head 3 times, and the only difference is that they have some different attacks. They're fine, but I feel like I never hear anyone talk about the actual boss fights here because it's the weakest part of the game compared to everything else. And again, this is like barely even an issue because they aren't bad, but this game is just nearly perfect and I had to pick something. Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins is where the Land series finally found its footing. It's a big improvement over the first game. The physics feel a lot better. The aesthetic is 100 times better. Like, you could actually tell what these things are. Give us the carrot power-up, the iconic Bunny Mario, and most importantly, the debut of Wario as a villain. The theme worlds from the Space Zone to the giant Mario statue are incredibly creative and memorable. Like, it's a very delightful game. However, the game's charm comes at the cost of a challenge, and that is the biggest issue in my opinion. Like, the game's cool, but it's just overly easy with very little challenge and is very short. While the first Land was frustrating due to its physics, I feel like Land 2 swings too far in the opposite direction where it's just a little too straightforward, power-ups are too abundant, and the game is structured in a way that allows you to tackle the worlds in any order, and that can naturally limit the difficulty curve. Like, for a seasoned Mario player, which is probably all of you watching this video, you could breeze through this faster than Dream Team's tutorial by a lot. I love Mario 64. The first game I ever finished was Mario 64 DS, and I actually will get to that later. But going back to the original, it defined the entire template for 3D game design. The freedom of movement, the sheer joy of the triple jump, the open-ended level design that encouraged exploration. But the jump to 3D did come with an unavoidable hurdle that remains its biggest flaw. The camera is clunky and regularly fights the player in tight spaces. The controls can be off as well, especially with the wing cap. The camera controlled by the C buttons is a constant, just frustrating battle that slows down the game, especially in the later, more demanding levels. Furthermore, while Mario's base movement is pretty much perfect, like it still feels good today, the wing cap controls, particularly the landing and precision required for the Secret Star missions, are notoriously slippery and imprecise. That is a flaw that is a product of its time, but that still causes me to yell at my screen. Sunshine is typically the most divisive mainline Mario game. Like, I feel like people either hate it or love it. I love it even if it isn't my favorite 3D Mario. It is weird, it's tropical, and it has the introduction of Flood, and that completely changed Mario's moveset. It added verticality and a unique cover mechanic. The atmosphere of Isle Delfino is incredible, the music is great, and the sheer creativity of levels like Pinna Park and the hotel is undeniable. It is a game that took a big risk, like it only has this tropical setting compared to previous Mario games having all these different settings, but this game was still very open like 64 and gave new movement options that resulted in some of the most memorable platforming challenges in the series, for better or for worse. The risk did not always pay off in this game, and the biggest issue is a combination of just poor design choices that feel like they were actively trying to frustrate the player. And there's two things I want to choose here. Blue coins feel like padding and are just in random obscure spots. Also, the controls in certain sections like the pachinko machine and lily pad ride are just brutal to control, just like with the wing cap in 64. The blue coins are the definition of filler. Like, there's 30 in every area, and I don't know, compared to something like Mario Odyssey where you have the purple coins, I just found those to be a lot more streamlined. Like, they're always just in the most obscure random spots here, and it's just is not satisfying to find. Even worse is just the levels I mentioned before, the pachinko machine and the lily pad ride. They force you to use clunky, slippery, and often just broken controls that feel like they were designed to make you throw your controller. Like, it's almost impossible to actually have good control on something like the pachinko machine. Like, it just feels like it's just a slot machine every time. I know someone's probably going to comment something else because there are other flaws in this game, so there are a number of things you could choose, but this is just what I'm going with here. Mario 64 running on a portable console just 8 years after release was very impressive, and then you add on Yoshi, Luigi, Wario, and 30 more stars, and there's a good amount of extra content here too. I know a lot of people have issues with 64 DS, and it's mostly for one, or rather 4 reasons, those being the D-pad arrows. It is pretty odd that the game that literally pioneered 3D platforming with an analog stick got remade on a console without one. You still do have 360-degree movement with the touchscreen, but come on, who actually used that? When I played this as a kid, it was just normal to me, but since I've played the original, it definitely feels off. I still love this game, but there's no getting around the controls. I usually don't even count remakes or remasters in these videos, but this was just a very obvious one I had to include. The game that launched seemingly 1,000 sequels, the original New Super Mario Bros. Was a massive success, brought back 2D Mario for the first time in over a decade, and introduced the modern visual style that would define the next decade plus of the franchise. Like, this was one of my favorite games as a kid. The first time I found the Mega Mushroom and Mini Mushroom were fun. I love the blue shell power, and I'm sad it's never came back. And the game felt like a perfect blend of nostalgia while being quote-unquote new. However, in an effort to be a successful relaunch, it played things a little too safe, and that is the biggest issue in my opinion. It is very easy and short, like the game is over before you know it, and the difficulty curve is almost non-existent for anyone who's played a classic Mario title. No, I still love it. I think there's a lot of great level designs here. I like the secrets here, I like the power-ups, I love the music. But even when I was a kid playing this, like, it never really gave me much of a challenge. And combined with the short length, like, there's 2 worlds here that are completely optional. It is just a very quick, easy adventure. And I do want to add on that I know you can skip worlds in other games, but in this you actually have to go out of your way to go to some of these worlds. Super Mario Galaxy is my favorite game of all time. Like, it's hard to find anything wrong with this game. Like, even beyond my opinion, it's considered one of the best video games ever made. The gravity-defying level design, the orchestral score, the sense of wonder here in the cosmic scale, like, it's in every sense of the word a nearly perfect game. Almost every galaxy is a new brilliant idea. Well, at least most of them. And the controls for the most part are very precise and feel really good. Because the game is just so close to perfection, like I talked about this in my video going over nearly perfect Nintendo games, it's really just a minor nitpick what I'm going to pick, but it's the camera. The camera controls here are a little off. Now, some people may say that it's the motion controls, like pointing at the screen to get the star bits, and you know, I actually like that. I think it's something that just made the game more engaging. I never had any problems with it. And the camera, it's usually fine. Like, I didn't have too many issues with it, but whenever you try to adjust it, it definitely can be annoying. Like, if you're at a bad angle, it just forces you to mess with it. It's just a very tiny issue on what's just nearly a perfect game. Like, I can barely think of any flaws with this. New Super Mario Bros. Wii was a cultural phenomenon. It brought 2D Mario back to the console, and more importantly, introduced 4-player co-op. The chaos of playing with friends or family, intentionally throwing people into lava, and the fun of using new power-ups like the propeller suit or the penguin suit just made this a fantastic game to play. I can't tell you how many times I went to a friend's house and we played this. However, the game's biggest issue is a direct result of its multiplayer focus, and it hurts the single-player experience. Some levels feel overcrowded trying to accommodate both single-player and 4-player sessions. When you're playing solo, the level design often feels a little too wide, with enemies placed awkwardly to facilitate 4 people bouncing off each other. Like, I feel like the levels aren't as tight and focused as classic 2D Mario games, and instead it does have a lot more open spaces, which isn't a bad thing if you're playing multiplayer, and it's something that's difficult to balance. Like, I still love this game, but it's definitely 10 times more fun playing with friends. How do you follow up one of the best games of all time? You make Super Mario Galaxy 2. It's a game that's nearly as good as the original, and for a lot of people it is better. It took everything great about the first Galaxy, like the gravity mechanics, the incredible level variety, the great music, and it doubled down on it. It brought back Yoshi, it has power-ups like the drill power-up, the cloud mushroom, and has some really brilliant level designs, while being a lot more open than the original Mario Galaxy. It moves at a relentless pace, like there's no story to slow things down, there's less somber levels here, and in my opinion, that relentless pace is kind of the biggest flaw. Like, it's not too much of a flaw, but this is another game that's close to being perfect. This game just rarely slows down. It makes it feel more like a challenge gauntlet than a grand adventure like the original Mario Galaxy. Galaxy 2 also famously cut the hub world and replaced it with a simple world map on Starship Mario. So yeah, this is a hub world, but come on, look at this comparison to these two. Well, this means you get straight to the action. It just loses a little bit of the charm of the first game. Like, the first Galaxy felt like a cosmic journey, and Galaxy 2 feels like a wonderful curated list of the best platforming levels ever made. And you may prefer this. This may not be a flaw to you, and that's totally fine. I'm just going off my experience, and this is one of the few things I can nitpick about this game. Mario 3D Land was a very crucial game for the 3DS. Like, the 3DS was not doing well at the time, and this got people to buy the console. This was also a step back in the series, obviously going from the Wii to the 3DS. They had to change it up. Basically combined 2D and 3D Mario. It introduced the flagpole to 3D, brought back the Tanuki suit, and had some smaller levels to account for being on a handheld. It is a fun, accessible game. It is a great entry point for new players, and it did prove that 3D Mario could work on a portable system, because unlike the previous time Nintendo tried to make a 3D Mario game on the go, it's actually three-dimensional movement here. But in its effort to be accessible, that became its biggest issue. This game is very generic compared to other 3D Mario games, and has very little unique music and levels. It borrows heavily from the new Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic, and it just results in a visual style that feels bland and uninspired compared to the tropical vibrancy of like Sunshine or the space theme of Galaxy. The music is largely forgettable, like try to name 5 original tracks here, and the levels theme, while functional, just lack the creative spark and ambition of its predecessors. It is a great game, but it's also by far the most forgettable 3D Mario, and doesn't really have that unique identity that the other games have. New Super Mario Bros. 2 is a game that just decided to lean into the most basic element of Mario, coins. The core idea of collecting 1,000,000 coins is fun, and the introduction of the gold flower and the coin generating blocks are fun for a bit. Like when you have people who don't understand the economy and say let's just print money, this is what you get. For 3DS game, rewards you with the sound of coins jingling, and it's a familiar 2D Mario experience, like there's not much else to say about it. However, the entire game is just built around the central gimmick that is just really shallow. The coin collecting gimmick doesn't meaningfully change the gameplay. You collect 1,000,000 coins, but they just give you extra lives. And in modern Mario games, extra lives are essentially meaningless, like you're never gonna run out. Like there's really nothing else new in this game, it's just an extremely generic Mario game, and it's fine for what it is. Like if you haven't played the other new Super Mario Bros. Games, like you'll really enjoy this, but if you have, you wouldn't really miss much by not playing this. However, I will say I do like some of the challenge packs. New Super Mario Bros. U is technically the most polished new Super Mario Bros. Game. It has nice visuals, hasn't made the jump to HD, has good controls, and the introduction of the flying squirrel suit is a nice addition. It also brought back the complexity of the world map from Mario World, and included some genuinely challenging secret levels. Like it's a well-designed platformer, and it brought the series to the Wii U, even though people thought this was the exact same game as New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And that's kind of its biggest issue. It arrived too late in the new series life cycle, and just suffered from fatigue. It plays things extremely safe, and lacks a true standout identity. Like this came out the same year as New Super Mario Bros. 2, and by this point we're just done with this aesthetic. Like it's a fun game once again, couple cool power-ups, but there's literally nothing revolutionary here. There's nothing that really makes this that much different from New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I find New Super Luigi U to just be a far better and more creative game. When I first played Mario 3D World, I actually wasn't the biggest fan of it, but as I've replayed it since, I've actually really grown to appreciate it. This is basically a much better version of Mario 3D Land. Like this is the first time we've had multiplayer in a mainline 3D Mario game, and it plays out great here. The game has the 3rd best soundtrack in the mainline Mario series, has some really creative level design, even though the aesthetic isn't the most unique, and of course there's the Cat Mario suit, which is really creative. However, the game's biggest flaw is a subtle yet frustrating friction in the core movement. However, the game's biggest flaw is often overlooked. The sort of imprecise platforming and run-up rules make movement feel slightly restricted. Unlike the freeform momentum-based movement of 64 or Galaxy or even Sunshine, 3D World has a slightly slippery feel, and the characters require a significant run-up to reach maximum speed and jump distance. This just felt really off, and the game's not overly difficult, so it isn't too big of an issue here, but it definitely is noticeable, especially if you play the Switch remaster, which greatly improves upon this. Like you'll really notice it going back. So now we gotta talk about Super Mario Run, and what is there to say about this one? Like it was Nintendo's first Mario game on mobile, and it's fine. Like it looks like a new Super Mario Bros. Game, the music is all from New Super Mario Bros. Game, and it controls fine, but the game's biggest flaw is just inherently its design. It just strips away the joy of Mario. The auto-running mechanic, while necessary for mobile, just removes the player's fundamental control over Mario's speed and direction. Like literally all you're doing is tapping the screen like any other mobile game, and it's not necessarily bad, but it's literally just a time waster. After a number of years of getting more linear Mario games, Mario Odyssey brought the series back to its roots, gave these wide open kingdoms with no set order of where to go. Like you can get any moon you want in pretty much any order in a level. Like there's incredible freedom here. This is the best movement we've ever seen in a Mario game. There's so much you can do here. Like this truly has some of the best platforming in any 3D platformer, at least for the mechanics you can use. The capture mechanic is a blast, and unlike the blue coins in Mario Sunshine, like I did mention this before, the purple coins just feel a lot better placed. However, in its quest to provide an overwhelming amount of content, it did introduce a flaw that does cheapen from the experience. Like many moons are absurdly easy. Like you could probably do anything in this game and find a moon. Like you could probably just jump in place 67 times and find a moon. Like for every moon you get from a challenging platforming sequence, like there's another one you get from kicking a rock. And while that's fine for like side collectibles, this is the main collectible here. Like it's not as rewarding as getting a star in Mario Galaxy or a star star in Mario 64, or even reaching the flagpole in like Mario 3D Land 3D World. I still think this is a fantastic game, but I do wish some of the moons were a little more difficult to get. Mario Wonder was the breath of fresh air that 2D Mario desperately needed. After close to 2 decades of just new Super Mario Bros. Games, this finally changed things up. Like, it has the talking flowers that we're getting in real life now. It has the elephant power-up, which I'm sure the marketing team loved, and it just has a very different vibe. Like, it does have pretty tight level design. I think a big issue is that this game just lacks boss fights, and that's never been like the biggest thing in a Mario game, but definitely is noticed here. Like, the boss fights are very limited here, and they're just not very good. I also think the music here, like, it's decent, but it's not one of the best we've seen. Like, at least I will give them credit, it is different than New Super Mario Bros. I used to have Super Mario Wonder a little higher on my ranking, but after replaying it a little bit, I've noticed that it does have some more flaws. But still, I really do like this game. I like that they changed up the formula, and I'm excited to see what the next 2D Mario platformer can be. And finally, we have Bowser's Fury. So this is more like an experiment and was bundled with Mario 3D World on the Switch. It feels like a proof of concept for an open world Mario. It just has this continuous interconnected world, the dynamic weather system, constant threat of Fury Bowser. Like, it's a great high energy experience that feels like a glimpse of what a full open world Mario could be. The co-op with Bowser Jr. is fun, and the scale of the world is impressive here. Like, it's not the biggest open world or anything, but for a Mario game, it definitely is notable. However, I think the biggest flaw here is that it just needed more time. Like, the game's way too short, and it doesn't feel super cohesive. Like, it ends as it's getting started, and it feels like a great tech demo, and I get that it's not a full game like it was packaged with another game, but it really just leaves you wanting more. Then in addition, like, a lot of the cat shines to defeat Fury Bowser feel pretty repetitive by the end, so that kind of contradicts wanting this game to be longer, but I feel like if they actually made this a full 3D Mario game, they would have found a better way to balance it. And that's the biggest issue with every Mario game. Of course, like pretty much any other video I make, this is all opinionated. You could think something I said that's a flaw is maybe the best thing in the game. You can think that there's a completely different flaw that's the biggest issue. And that's totally okay. We all play games differently, like we all have different opinions on them. And I want to know what your opinion is. Like, let me know what you think the biggest flaw in every Mario game is. And if you did disagree with me, I want to hear why. Tell me why you think I'm wrong about something either being a flaw or just not being the biggest flaw. And consider joining my Discord, as I'm trying to build a community over there. And subscribe to see my other content. And for just a couple bucks a month, if you really like what I do here, you could become a channel member. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.